Willow Creek Springs presents Healthy Living with your host, Joe Grumbine.
Well, hello and welcome to the Healthy Living Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Grumbine, and today we've got a very special guest. We're going to be continuing our series that we're calling Healthy Living Through Adversity. And we have Juan with us. Juan, welcome to the show. Welcome back.
Right on. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for having me back.
Well, I think this series is starting to be successful. It took a minute before people realized it was going on, but it seems like it's starting to catch on.
Yeah, and I would like to just say, man, thank you for all your listeners who are listening to your podcast, and all those who commented. Those comments were very special to me, and I thank you for sharing those with me. But just letting all those who commented know that you did share those comments with me: Donna, Scott, Benton, Miriam, Kailash, and Melanie. So just thank all of them for their comments. And in my view, it allowed me to feel like I was being seen and heard. And that's especially important when you're thinking about like rehabilitation and connection, as we talked about before, or helping people reconnect back to themselves. So it's just letting someone know, like, I see you, I hear you, and that's what those comments did for me. So me and Addie, we were like on cloud nine, just like, wow, everything that we're doing is paying off. People see, that this is very important work, and it's going to heal generations, so.
Well, one of the people that you were referring to was just on, Scott was just on.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded
as a guest, and he's a psychologist, and you were talking about the importance of being seen and heard, and that was one of the salient points that he made about, his practice. He'd been practicing for 30 years, and he actually spent over 20 years of it working with in the corrections world through one of the jail systems up in Illinois. So he was very aware of the importance of, as you were just saying, being able to feel like you've been heard and seen.
Yeah, that, to me, that's what I felt. They did something very important, like mention me by name, and that recognizes my humanity, and as we had talked to, the previous episodes, recognizing someone's humanity is so crucial, to relating to change just as a whole, so and that helped me to connect back to my own. I'm so grateful just to have this opportunity. And again, I want to thank you, for giving me this opportunity, because it's a humbling and healing place for me. It's given me an opportunity to give back and share all the stuff that I've learned. And hopefully, plant some seeds in listeners, and maybe they can learn something about themselves, and maybe it'll give them some information to go and share with others. So it really is. It's an awesome opportunity. So I thank you for that.
You're very welcome. And I'd like to share one little point that he had made. He has a counseling service called the Mosaic Institute or something like that, but Mosaic is the key word. And what he said was, we're like a mosaic. We're made up of all of the choices we've made through our lives. And we find that people that are incarcerated, and I found myself incarcerated at one point, more than once, and it was as a result of a single choice. But that choice does not define us. That choice is a part of who we are. And I think it's important to realize that sometimes we make choices that affect us dramatically, and other times we make choices that we barely notice. But every one of those choices put together are who we are today. I think that was just a very important point to consider.
Yeah, I mean, we have this, this bad kind of like thing in society where, we classify people through like the worst things they've ever done, right? And
Right.
so, it's like a labeling. We have this bad habit of labeling people as if people are so simple that you can just label them
Right.
according to what something that they've done, and we're more sophisticated than that, you know. We are like, as we I don't know if we've spoken previous before, but yeah, these behaviors are like pathways. These are things that we learned growing up. These choices were like products of, of your, just for the sake of an analogy, if you grew up out in a jungle somewhere, you were someone who grew up in civilized society,
Right.
and so it's a little difficult to say, you take someone from a civilized society and you try to judge someone who grew up in a jungle.
Right.
There's a different, set of rules. And so, so to me, the unique thing about our brains that we know now, is they change. The decisions that I made yesterday does not have to be the same decisions that I make today or tomorrow. I can
Absolutely.
learn new information. I can rewire my brain, and so that should be the how you come to identify someone. It's not about the decisions they made. It's about the what do you call it? The work that they're putting in today to make better decisions tomorrow.
Absolutely.
That's my view. It's like, are you putting in the work to, you can't be responsible for not having a certain amount of information. So if I come out of a certain background, I can't necessarily be responsible for not learning something as a child, but I can be responsible today if I choose not to learn today.
Exactly. No, it's spot on. We're
Yeah.
dynamic creatures, and every minute of every day we're changing, and we're never the same as we were yesterday or even an
Yeah.
hour ago. And so yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
If we decide to stay stuck in a rut and make the same decisions over and over again, well, then that starts to define us. But at any given moment, we could decide we want to be reborn. We want a new chance. We want to start over. We have that gift that we were given by our Creator just for being human, and it's
Yeah.
pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're bringing up a good point because it's something that I confronted years ago. With we're so locked into these limited understandings of who we are.
Right.
It's like I think I'm this and that's it, and as if I don't grow no more. And so it's like, okay, I'm stuck here. This is Juan. Juan likes this food. He likes this color. He likes this, and that's all I come to know about myself. But in actuality, I have myself in this very small box.
Right.
And I can always like new foods. I can
Sure.
always have new limitations. I can always have new experiences, and but the question is, how do I relate to myself? And I think that's one of the things that is missing in our society is, I mean, where do you go to learn how to find your authentic self? And that's kind of like
Right.
what we're going to be talking about today too. But like how many people actually really know who they are? Where do you learn that? Where do you go to find out, like, what makes me me? Like,
People
you
spend a
know,
lifetime trying to
and
answer
then,
that question.
right, exactly. And you could spend a lifetime not even knowing, like, this is not even the real you.
Right.
Wait, and that's the fascinating part of like doing this work, is really getting back to unpacking, all that trauma, and then getting back to your authentic self, who you really are.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, right before we get into a summary, if you don't mind, I would like to invite your listeners and any professionals. National Crime Victims Week is coming up April 20th through the 24th. And that's where we hold things in the institution where we honor survivors of crime by hearing their stories and healing their path their journey to healing. And also, people who have, like myself, offenders of crime, we learn about the impact of crime, and that creates empathy. So, if possible, if any of your listeners interested during that week, we would like for them to, share and any of their comments or feedback, or brainstorm with us on some of their ideas of what we can do between April 20th to 24th to help people who have been either victims of crime or who have committed crimes to come and learn some healing ways to, if you've been impacted by crime, how to move forward, or if you are an offender or someone like that, tools that they can use as well to foster empathy.
Absolutely. And if anybody that falls on either side of that equation is interested in coming on as a guest, please reach out. I'm easy to find through the show notes or however you find me. I love to hear your story.
Yeah, it's so important. Just one way that looks in the institution, I mean, you'll be so surprised. It's a restorative justice. So we have a criminal justice system, right? And that's what most people are familiar with, is criminal justice. But there's actually another law. It's called restorative justice. So in criminal justice, the state makes itself the victim. Okay, and all too often, the needs of the victim is ignored, right? Because the crime is now against the state. And also the needs of the offender is ignored. It's just about punishment. But in restorative justice or transformative justice, the dialogue is between the offender and the survivor of the offense. And what that means is the survivor of the offense, part of the healing process is learning how someone can come to a place where they can harm someone else. What were some of the factors in their life that got them to this point where they could hurt someone? And as we mentioned before, understanding that disconnect and how when someone disconnected from themselves, they no longer was a part of saw their humanity and could not recognize the humanity in other people. So that's one part is, the survivors understanding that component of crime. And the other part is the offenders not only
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Not only offenders listening to survivors who have been impacted by crime and the long-term impact that had on their life, but also the offender examining how did they get themselves in a place where they could commit crimes, right, and hurt people. And so that's what restorative justice is about. And so during the National Crime Victims' Rights Week, these two come together, survivors and offenders. And this is the type of dialogue that takes place during that time.
Absolutely. And, in going through, I've spent a lot of time, with a human rights organization. I've sat in a lot of courtrooms, and usually the only time that there's a connection between the person who committed the crime and the person who had it committed to is really right before at sentencing. They have what they call a victim's impact statement, where often they'll have the victim's family come in and talk about that. But the point of that is to try to get
You have 60 seconds remaining
to be more harsh, and to impact the judge. And that's it. Oftentimes the person who is convicted never really gets a chance to interact with the recipient or their family. And when it does, it's powerful. I've heard many stories of people that have reconciled from, terrible crimes and found forgiveness on both sides. And the growth that can occur in a situation like that is unbelievable.
Yeah, correct. I mean, it's not, and one point too is also the people who are committing these crimes are also victims of crimes themselves.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's part of that's part of understanding that process.
Yeah, there's absolutely no question. I don't think there's very many cases where somebody who commits a violent act, especially, but any kind of a serious crime, wasn't the victim of something serious themselves.
Definitely. We lost them, but
Okay.
I'm here.
All right, Adonai. Yeah, this is an incredible conversation, and we're just about to get into the topic, that
Yes.
we're getting ready to discuss. But just going through some of these things, I think people just don't get it. If they haven't had a situation where they've been involved with somebody who is in an institution or, has committed an act that got them
Kill
incarcerated.
link.
You
Sorry.
people
Okay,
put
I'm
people
back.
into a box. Oh, okay, good. Well, we're just kind of just touching on the impact of what we've been talking about. This is really important things because, like you were saying, people get put in a box. Most people, especially people who have never lived or known somebody who has gone through the justice system, they just automatically assume, oh, this is how it is, and somebody who does a thing is a certain kind of person. And we're really opening up some elements of humanity that I think is necessary for people to understand. I'm hoping that really we're going to open a lot of eyes with this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, most simply put, um, eh, I mean, I'm just going to say it quite frank is, you can't treat someone like an animal and expect them to be human, right?
Right.
So if you want to have people behave like they are productive members of society, then relate to them like they're, you talk to them in the way that you expect them to behave, or treat them the way you expect them to behave. And so this brings a good point. So speaking from experience, when you're going through, just growing up as, you experience different levels of violence or victimization, you absorb, let me say that, I absorb that energy, and that's that learned behavior where the victim becomes the victimizer. This energy was absorbed, and so that's the energy that I put out. But a fascinating thing, I learned that from Dr. Richard Schwartz, who has No Bad Parts. But what I learned is, I said, well, if I can absorb the energy of my abuser, then I can also absorb the energy of my healers.
Absolutely.
And that's why it's so important for these conversations. I may not have known what humanity felt like. I may not know of what love felt like. But when someone comes along and they love me and they treat me like I'm human, then I'm able to absorb that energy and I can now give away what I am getting. But I couldn't give away what I didn't have before.
Exactly.
No,
that's
yeah.
that's well put. I think that, us reaching into these institutions and acknowledging some of the restorative programs and working on building restorative programs, I think is important. Like you said, it gives the people something to feed from. It gives the people that are participating um, a a way to grow and become those things that they're learning.
Yeah. And by the way, I mean, let me go ahead and give a shout out to some of these restorative justice programs, especially the ones that played the most significant role in my development. You had a professor on your show, Megan McDrew. She comes in every week, with the empathy and action program. And part of her program is she brings college students in from society. And, the beautiful thing about her program, it would look like when I went in there, you had all these college students and they come in and the first thing they do is they shake your hand.
Right.
Now, from someone out there in society, you wouldn't know the importance of that. But for me, who's been in here who've had no human to human. So in here, the guards don't touch you, right, unless they're putting cuffs on you, right? So they don't touch you or they're patting you down in some negative way. So you're talking about people who've been incarcerated for 20-something years who've never had any human contact.
Right.
You know, and so aside from a pat down or you getting cuffed up or something like that. So when she brought her program in here, you know, and I shook someone's hand, it was, believe it or not, it was so awkward. You know, it was so awkward for me at first, right? And it's like I almost forgot what it felt like to be human until that moment. It wasn't comfortable, you know? And so now, you know, I've been through her program a couple different times. Now it's more comfortable. It's comfortable. I look forward to shaking people's hands.
Nice.
But that human to human contact is so important. And so she's a strong advocate of ours. I mean, if any of your listeners can look her up, Megan McDrew, Empathy in Action. She has a transformative justice center here in Monterey. So
yeah, I'm hoping to get her back.
And then yeah.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Next time I see her, I'll definitely let her know that, you know, I gave her a shout on your show and see if she can, she'll visit you again. And also another person is Fritzy. Yeah, another person is Fritzy Horseman with the Compassion Prison Project.
Okay.
And so Fritzy, she's responsible for all the knowledge that I know when it comes to neuroscience and, you know, by how trauma affects your biology and things like that. So she has a course called Trauma Talks. And I'm the chairman of that group here in the prison. And so that's a lot of this information. This is kind of what we go over week after week in the groups as we run about 100 participants a cohort.
Wow. So that's a lot.
We have 50. Yeah, we have 50. Yeah, we have 50 in our Thursday group or in our Sunday group. We have 50 on our Thursday night, and we have an English and Spanish. There's 25 apiece on our Thursday night.
Wow.
So we're in here. Yeah, we're in here getting busy.
I love it.
Yeah. So if you would like, I'll give a quick summary of where we left off last time.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So we start off with the need for asking for help. We talked about how trauma creates a disconnect within the person's body, mind, thoughts, emotions, and other people. The importance of reconnecting to yourself, and how, especially with myself, prior to feeling safe in my own body now, I never felt like there was a safe place for me because of all the trauma and things that I've been through, and that was my worldview. We talked about the brainstem, the amygdala and prefrontal cortex, and toxic stress, ACEs, and the worldview and how that shapes your worldview of I don't matter, no one cares about me, I can't do anything, I'm alone, and the world is a dangerous place, no one will take care of my needs, and there's nothing in me worth knowing. And that was the you know, for me, I was so, I don't know, I kind of, my eyes got a little watery when I thought about this last one. There is nothing in me worth knowing. And the reason why that was a little impactful for me is because I remember being in that place, and I just sympathize with anybody in that place. If anybody is feeling like there's nothing in them worth knowing, let me be the first to tell you you're wrong. You're very special. You matter. You're very important. And there's a bunch of wonderful people out there who care about you. So I just come to see this about myself now. So, and the last thing was the 4 S's of secure attachment.
Hi, this is Joe Grumbine, and I wanted to share an update. The platform that hosts this podcast has made some changes to the subscriber settings, and we have a number of subscriber-only episodes that we offer to the supporters, and for a minimum of $3 a month, we can get you signed up. And if you're already signed up and you're having some kind of trouble locating these episodes in the other platforms, I would say maybe the best answer is to unsubscribe and then resubscribe. I'm sorry for the hassle. I don't have any way to make a change, but I'm very grateful for all the support. Thank you. Absolutely. We covered a lot of ground. And then subsequently,
Yeah.
we had 3 different interviews, and that was also powerful. And so, what's our next step here?
Yeah, so I would like to look at the being alone with your hurt. And what that means is like, so now that all this trauma has happened, right? As children, and again, I'm looking from a group setting, what happens inside of group. So in group, I learned that when I started to experience all this trauma and things like that, I was put in a position where I abandoned my authentic self, right? And in abandoning my authentic self, this fractured self came forward, right? This fake version of me. And what this fake version of me is the person that I thought I had to be in order to survive whatever I had to survive. And in that process, there came this pushing down of my emotions and becoming what others wanted me to be. So, the pushing down of your emotions looks like, men can't cry or men don't cry. Right. I'm not supposed to feel, I'm supposed to be tough, and whatever. And that's when I'm abandoning my authentic self, is when I'm thinking like I'm not supposed to be scared. I'm not supposed to have fear. I'm not supposed to show emotions. I'm not supposed to show weakness or vulnerability. That's a denying of the very thing that makes me human. And so that's when that fake self comes forward. And in that place, that's where that depression set in, the anxiety, the confusion, the numbness, the lack of emotional intelligence, the inability to describe how I felt. And to me, like, that's a great, like, little focal point for right now, is because I sympathize. We live in a society where we're always choosing someone else's expectations, or we're trying to live up to someone else's expectations at the expense of our own.
Right.
Or we're so afraid of just saying like how we really feel, or where we're at. We're always trying to, for the sake of being attached to someone or connected to someone, we value their belief system over our own.
I think that's prevalent. I think a lot of people live in that world.
Right. Yeah. And we don't even question it, right? Because we've been, like, for me, this became second nature, right? You deny yourself for so long. It's like, so who I became was a person who often took on other people's beliefs and abandoned my own. So I had to wait until someone else told me what was okay and what wasn't okay, or what was acceptable, what wasn't acceptable, or how I should feel about that, or how I shouldn't feel. And it's like I had no concept, like, or no of myself, like, where am I at in all of this process? And that's another thing that I learned, like, when and in that whole victimization process, I lost my voice to speak up for myself. And I went into this, like, as Dr. Schwartz said, this exile state, and I wouldn't advocate for myself. I was, it's like I was always this kid who was afraid to speak up for himself. Mm-hmm. And it was just easier just to go along with what somebody else said, just to fit in. And and that's why it's so important in the group dynamic. When people are speaking, we give them, like me speaking right now, it's so important for your listeners to give me their undivided attention. Because why? Because this could be the first time I'm actually speaking up.
Right.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
And I'm learning to not suppress and not to push down, but to be vulnerable and put myself out there and say, hey, this is me, this is my story. And how that information is received, you know, depending on where I'm at, it can cause me to go back into shutdown mode, or it can encourage me, like all the listeners that gave me their feedback, say, oh, man, I want to go back and do that. And this is cleansing, you know, and then also it can encourage other people who are listening. I remember, you know, hearing someone on the prison yard, he was talking about some of the victimization that he went through. And this was when I was in a place where I wasn't talking about my stuff, and I was too embarrassed to talk about my stuff. But I remember hearing him talk about his stuff, and he was sexually molested, and it made me uncomfortable to hear that. But also, I also admired him too, because
You have 60 seconds remaining.
I remember thinking, like, man, I wish I had that much courage to say and speak my truth. Like, that happened to me too. But I was in that place, you know, like, I'm not going to ever tell nobody.
We'll go another segment.
Huh?
I think we'll go one more segment. I think that because we're down to the last of this call, but we'll do another segment on this one. We'll go a little long because we're just getting into some real good information here.
Okay, I'll call you right back.
The time goes by real quick.
I
Juan got
know.
a lot of valuable information, great stories, insight. I love listening to him.
It's so hard. As soon as you just start getting into it, all of a sudden it's like, whoop, there goes your.
I know.
You got 60 seconds left. So normally we just go two segments, but this one here, I think we're just starting to get into the real meat of the conversation. So I definitely want to go one more round with this one.
Yeah, definitely.
You know,
I'm gonna get him right back in.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll jump right on in. It's incredible to listen to the humanity of somebody who's been 20 years on the inside and still working through it and doing better than plenty of us on the outside.
All
Okay.
right.
All right, you're back in. Let's keep going. This is awesome.
Yeah, so I was talking about how, you know, hearing someone else's story, although I was not in a place where I would want to talk, I wanted to talk about, and I wasn't at this time, I wasn't going to share anything about what happened to me, but it still planted a seed in me to say, you know what, I could really respect the fact that he had courage enough to admit that. And even silently within myself, I was telling myself and encouraging myself, like, one day I want to do that. I want to do that. But I knew I wasn't in the place then. And the reason why I'm saying that is because this is why these conversations are so important, and especially for people who have already reached out and start talking about some of the stuff that they've been through, but how important it is for, you know, the listener, because there might be someone that was in that same place where I was at, was like, wow, you know, this man just admitted to something that I'm not ready to admit to yet.
Right.
You know, and hopefully this gives them a little bit of courage, like it gave me, to say, you know what, one day I will share my story and what I've been through, and I don't have to carry this. I'm not alone. I'm not by myself. And there's a community of people out there that I can turn to for support, and they can start their healing journey.
That's where the healing really starts, is when you know you've got a safe enough place where you can start to be vulnerable again.
Yes. And what you said right there is key, right? A safe place where you can be vulnerable. And so how can we have this safe place when people are feared that they're going to be judged, or people are going to judge them by their behavior, and they put these labels on them and all these different things? That doesn't create a safe place.
No, exactly. You end up putting up walls and defenses to protect yourself, and then you don't have any way to heal at that point because you're busy with your guard up.
Right. And so therefore you can't be authentic.
Right.
Right? You can't there's no authenticity there. You know, a person can't find there's more of that pushing down, there's more of that shame, there's no confronting. I stepped out. I'm getting ready to go to work right now, so might get a little loud. But there's that there's no authenticity there. You know, there's no healing and there's no growth in secrecy. And so that's why we want to accept people. We want to give people a safe place where they can come and share some of the worst things they've done, things that happened to them, so they can begin their path to healing. Because there is no path to healing aside from that.
Right. It's true. It's true. And you know, all the way from, you know, I was raised Catholic, and confession was always a big part of, you know, the doctrine, and there's something really healing about going in and confessing what you did wrong, you know, and acknowledging it, owning it,
Right.
and being in a place where you felt was safe enough to do that, and making an act of contrition to say, you know, I recognize what I did. I'm gonna work on it. I'm gonna do something to try to make it right.
Yeah. And, you know, that's just so, you know, as I sit in these groups, I hear men who, like myself, they, you know, they're, you know, because when you go through this victimization, you're like on autopilot, right? So it's like you're there, it's like you're watching someone else drive almost, right? And you're doing all these things, but you're like on autopilot. And then when you come in here, you like wake up and you realize like, wow, what did I do? And so some of these men, you hear all the regrets, you hear all of like, you know, and they're just as confused as how they could do this as anyone, right? And so they don't even know without the right resources. And that's why, like I said, I give so much credit to the Compassion Prison Project, because their curriculum actually lays out how you got to this point, you know. But prior to this, you know, people were just clueless as to like, how did I end up doing something like this, you know?
Wow.
And so here comes this shame, you know, and they'll compound that shame with people who are judging them for what they've done. And so now it's like, okay, is the goal that we want to shame someone, or is the goal that we want productive people in society? Like, we have to align our goals. Like, what is the goal, right? And so and I get the honor of hearing these men's story, and I remember sharing my perspective. So there's a Bible verse that says, to whom much is given, much is required. To whom much more is given, much more is required.
Mm-hmm.
So what I ended up doing was I ended up kind of like reworking that in my own way, and to help people who feel so burdened with how many people they hurt. And what I said is, to who has hurt many people, you have to help a lot of people.
I like
and
that.
To those who've hurt a lot more people, well, you got to help a lot more people.
I like that.
So it's yeah, you know, it's just like you have to like, what are you going to do about this, right? Because they're useless if they're just going to sit there with the woe is me, I feel ashamed.
Right.
And that's useless. You can't do anything with that. But if you can say, you know what, yeah, I hurt a lot of people, and therefore I'm responsible for being a part of a lot of people's healing.
It's so true.
I'm responsible. I'm obligated, to help a lot of people now.
You know, that's powerful, because, you know, when people think about punishment as somehow solving something, the only thing punishment can do is make you aware
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
that you need to do something to make it right. You know, it's not in and of itself, it doesn't do anything other than, you know, keep somebody away from the rest of society. But if it unlocks that door and says, like what you just came up with, and realize that, okay, I recognize what I did. I recognize how I've impacted people, and now I got to work on what am I going to do about it. And I think that's really where things
Right.
start getting real. What am I doing about it right now?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and when you think about punishment, what that does is, the unfortunate part is, and we talked about the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, right? So when you
Right.
think about punishment, we have to look at it from the stress response perspective, and all it's going to do is it triggers me, and it'll trigger my, my amygdala to shut down my prefrontal cortex. I go in survival mode. I'm
Right.
not learning anything in that place of punishment,
Right.
right? I'm not learning anything,
Exactly.
So punishment is not, that's not the correct way, if the goal is to, like, well, you want someone to learn their lesson, that ultimately the purpose of the system is to say, hey, it's not okay to hurt someone,
Right.
right? That's the ultimate goal. I mean, if we were to like summarize the purpose of the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, if we were to summarize what their outline and their goals should be, it would be to help people understand that it's not okay to hurt someone.
Right.
That's in essence that should be a mission
to
statement,
correct the
right?
behavior.
It's not
Yeah,
okay to hurt someone.
It's not okay, so you don't do it.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And I
So
think that's part of it, though, is putting the action into it. If you spend your time working on helping somebody else, your brain doesn't even go into a place where you might think to hurt somebody.
right. Yes. I mean, and that's the ultimate goal, and that's what we're teaching in the group, But unfortunately, and I mean, I'm sad to be the one to have to admit this, but when you hurt people, and
Right.
when you're not in a place where, like, you experience hurt, and then you get these healthy tools, like how to practical tools on how to process that hurt. Well, without that intervention, the hurt turns into wanting to hurt, and so many of us in the group, we fell into that trap of not having a healthy way to process the worst stuff that ever happened to us, and which is, and when you're victimized at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, I mean, that young brain is not equipped with
Right.
practical tools. You know what I mean, when you really think about it. So
Oh, yeah.
it shouldn't be so strange. It shouldn't be so strange for people in society to understand, like, a person did not have practical tools to help them process the worst things that happened to them, and therefore they had these unhealthy ways of expressing that hurt.
Agreed. I think that.
But
Go ahead.
go ahead. Okay,
No.
so that's what we're learning now, right, in our group. So now we're learning how to go back and process that hurt. That's the whole goal of the group, is to go back now. We didn't get a chance then. And so, in Fritzy Horseman's curriculum, it says you're not responsible for the trauma that you experienced growing up. You're not responsible for that. But you are responsible for healing it. And that's very important. And that should be the focal point, right? The focal point should be, yes, we are responsible for healing that trauma.
I think that's important. Indeed. I mean, we oftentimes we take a victim mentality, and it's
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
all these things are, I'm stuck. I can't do this. I'm look what happened to me, whatever it is. But like you said, regardless of what happened to you, you didn't cause it to happen to you. But in the end, you're the only one who can heal it. It's your job to heal it now.
Yeah. and I guess we could, here's one of my things I want to leave your audience with. So here's my analogy of, like, how we experience trauma. So, imagine if you're driving, right? You have this car and you get into this car accident, right? And imagine you don't go to the repair shop. But you like, I'm going to drive this car again. And you drive again, you get into another accident. And then you get into another accident. And then as you just keep going along, you get into all of these accidents. And there's never a repair process. Well, the condition of that car, it's not going to be in its optimum condition.
It becomes
But that's how
undrivable.
we are, when we're right. When you look at it from the context of a car accident, trauma after trauma after trauma after trauma, right, with no repair in between. Like, I don't know if I shared, but my ACE score is 9. So that's 9 car accidents I had. When you think about it, that's 9 car accidents that I had with no repair in between.
Yeah,
And
that's
this
a lot.
all at a very crucial age. Right. And then that's not even to say that there's things that I experienced that are not even written in the ACEs survey.
Right.
So, but the whole point was there was no repair process. But now, given this opportunity and with the right curriculum, now I'm able to go back and I can begin my repair process. And that's the end. That's the whole moral of the story. That's the whole purpose of incarceration, and what the purpose should be in the mission statement.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
We have that opportunity to do the repairs that we should have been doing a long time ago.
And the truth is, you can rebuild a car from, what they call a basket case. It can just be a bunch of beat up parts, and you can still put it together and refurbish it, restore it, and get it working again.
Yeah. And then maybe that should be the takeaway from this whole segment is like, for everyone who's listening, is how are you going to rebuild your life?
I love it.
What are you going to do to rebuild your life and to start the repairs that you need to start your journey of repair today? So that's my takeaway. That's my closing. That's
beautiful. I really think that, that exemplifies what we all should be working on. And especially maybe those of us that are not currently incarcerated, but it's important to have empathy for those that are going through a situation like you are, and realize that, especially what I'm hearing is you're not only helping and healing yourself, but you're helping others to do the same.
Yes, he definitely is. I think that's his life goal.
Yeah, I love this. I love this, what we're doing here. I feel like we're building a concept out, and we're identifying a number of issues and problems and ways that people can find answers and find healing. And that's really what it's all about. This is the way that you get to healthy living is by healing yourself. Hey, he's back for the final thought here. We were just
yes, sir.
We were just going through kind of what you were saying, and I think it's powerful that we're being given an outline and a direction that we can recognize all these things that you found the hard way, like you said, going through this whole ACEs score and having, like you said, 9 incidents or accidents or situations that you're literally rebuilding your spirit, your body, your heart, your mind. It's all kind of getting put back together now, and what you found is something that I found a long time ago, is that when you help somebody else, when you go through a thing, whatever it is, in my case, it's cancer, and many other things, and the things that you've gone through, you now have a tool to help somebody else who's been through that as well, because there's something about empathy that's more powerful than sympathy. And when you can say, listen, I know what you're going through. I've been there. I know it. I am who you are. Um, that person
Right.
is likely to go, oh, okay, you hear me, you understand me. Maybe I should listen to you. And you're given now a tool um, that can be powerful. And I like, right now I have people reaching out to me almost every day wanting to learn, about how I, you know, healed my cancer, and they find inspiration in my journey. They call me as being a warrior and being strong and all that, and I'm like, shit, I just wanted to live. I don't consider myself
Right.
anything. I,
Right.
I was humbled by the whole experience, but truly I just wanted to be alive, and I was willing to do what it took, and I learned some things that way.
Right.
Well, you're going to the same thing. You're learning the tools that it took to recognize and identify, and now you're owning your healing. And I think that the tool of helping other people to heal comes back to you many times, and is going to only expedite your healing.
Yeah. I mean, and it puts me back into that very important, like,
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
so it puts me back into that community, of healthy people. And yeah, for me, I'm so grateful for my journey. I know some people like, and here, you look at prison as a bad thing, but for me, I've always, it's about your perspective of things. And I remember, young Juan, when I came in, I say young Juan, I was 25 years old when I came in. I'm 46 now. But, young Juan refused to look at prison as a place of torment and punishment. And I realized, like, I could turn this place, and I determined, like, this is going to be my university. It's not going to be my prison. It's going to be my university. And, coming up with a single mother who was, had 11 children, I'm the second youngest, so I was all the way at the bottom. She worked 2 8-hour jobs to provide for us. And, so I've rarely seen anything of her. It was about survival. And so what I'm grateful for now is, like, especially learning about attachment theory, the type of, relationship you have with your caregiver form the relationship that you would have with other people. And you would understand how mind-blowing that would be for me, seeing, like, hey, well, I pretty much was raised by children,
All right.
Because my mom had to go out and she had to go work. So I'm like, I didn't necessarily have a caregiver, and so that's my heart goes out to, people like myself who came up in some of the most extreme circumstances and, single parent homes, didn't have the caregivers there, or, and I understand the depression, the anxiety. And even if someone didn't come up in a single parent home, that doesn't mean the neglect wasn't as severe. Like, that could even be, we see it every day, people who are seemingly wealthy. Oh, they had everything, right? We say, oh, they had everything. Why would they do this? Well,
Right.
they didn't have that love from their caregiver, that connection,
Right.
And so my heart just goes out to them, because I remember what it's like being in that place of just being lost and confused as to who I am, depressed, not knowing what direction I'm going in, or just that loneliness, like nobody out there understands me. Like nobody understands me, and I know that place, and like you said, I have that empathy to, like, now I'm like, I have to help people like me, find their way and let them know, like, no, you're not alone, you're not by yourself, and you do matter, and you matter just because you're a human being. That's it. That's your birthright. You don't have to do anything. You matter just because you are a part of this human race.
It's so
And
true.
that's enough in and of itself. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
powerful.
so, yeah, and I like, and that's the powerful thing that you're giving us in this session. Like, you're giving us that space to create what we do in group, we get to create that here.
Yes, absolutely. That's the point of it
Yeah.
all. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Well,
Yeah.
I'm really pleased. I love the way this conversation is going, and I feel like people are going to be able to take away a lot of healing from this episode. This is really a lot going on, and reinforcing, going back to what we've covered before. So, if you're listening for the first time, this is the fifth part of this series, and we've covered a lot of ground. So I encourage you to go back and start from the beginning of this series and get into all the pieces we've been doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, I just thank you so much, Joe, for everything that you're doing to make this happen. And man, this is really awesome.
I love it. Well, we're just getting started, Juan, and we got a lot to come. So we're gonna cap this episode here and get ready for the next one. So this has been another episode of the Healthy Living Podcast, and this is the Healthy Living Through Adversity series. And we're just so grateful for all the listeners who make this show possible. And we will see you next time. This has been another episode of the Healthy Living Podcast. We produce this show so that people can share their stories, people that have overcome obstacles, people that are undergoing obstacles. We're building a community of health-minded individuals. If you're interested in supporting the show, please leave a review on the platform you're listening to it on. If you're interested in becoming a guest, please send an email to itsjoegrumbine@gmail.com, or you can send a note into the notes section of the podcast. All right. Well, thank you for supporting this show, and we hope you've enjoyed it.